In a humble little theater, a young black actress finally landed the first leading role of her career. Everything seemed ready, until just minutes before showtime, she spotted a young boy crying beside his unconscious mother in an empty hallway. Faced with an impossible choice, she stayed to help, giving up the role and the dream she had fought so hard for. What she didn't know was that the boy's mother was a famous film director. Moved by the actress's selflessness, the director offered her the lead role in her next film. Before we begin, take a deep breath and ask yourself, what would you have done in her place? The hallway backstage was humming with quiet energy. Subdued voices, the rustle of scripts, the occasional clink of a prop being adjusted. In the makeup mirror, the harsh glow of vanity bulbs cast a circle of light around Marina Johnson's face. 24 years old, skin the color of rich mahogany, eyes sharp with determination and shadowed by sleepless nights, she sat still as the makeup artist applied the final stroke of eyeliner. This wasn't just another performance. For Marina, this was the night, her first leading role, her name printed on the program, a line of dialogue with weight, with breath, with consequences. This wasn't just theater. It was the culmination of 100 side jobs and sacrifices stitched into one performance. Born in the South Bronx to a mother who worked double shifts as an ER nurse and a father who passed away when she was 12, Marina's path had never been lined with opportunity. She hadn't been discovered in a cafe or flown to LA for a callback. She had waited tables, scrubbed dressing rooms, memorized monologues in borrowed clothes, and walked in the rain to casting calls where she was either too much or not enough, too black for this, not edgy enough for that. But tonight she was center stage. The play was called The Wall of Memory, a minimalist psychological piece set inside the mind of a woman confronting the trauma of her past. Marina played Camille, a survivor slowly piecing herself back together. It was the kind of role actresses fought for, the kind that critics remembered. Rehearsals had been brutal. Hours spent digging into painful emotions, crawling across bare floorboards in an empty black box theater, begging for more realism, more depth. And now here she was, just 10 minutes from opening. Her costume hugged her lean frame like second skin. Her lines, memorized like gospel, were waiting just behind her teeth. The director had nodded at her earlier, a rare sign of approval. Even the assistant stage manager, a woman who barely looked anyone in the eye, had given Marina a whispered, "Break a leg." Marina stood up from the makeup chair and stepped toward the side hallway leading to the dressing room. She needed a moment, just a breath, not from fear, but from reverence. Her heart wasn't pounding because she was nervous, it was pounding because she cared. She wanted to honor the character, the process, the people who never got this kind of chance. People like her mother, like the girls back in her neighborhood who thought Broadway was a different planet. The hallway was quiet, lit by a single strip of overhead fluorescent light that buzzed faintly, the kind of light that made the walls look more yellow than white. She passed racks of spare costumes, crates labeled Act 2, and a mop bucket parked in the corner like someone had forgotten it mid-shift. Her footsteps softened as she slowed down. She was alone. Everyone else was either in the wings or in their seats. Marina placed a hand against the cool wall and exhaled deeply, just once. She wasn't thinking of fame, not even reviews. She was thinking of her father, of the time he took her to her first community play and said, "You're going to be up there one day, baby girl. I just know it." She was thinking of her mom's hands, how they trembled the first time she saw Marina in stage makeup. She was thinking of every no that brought her to this yes. This was the moment before the moment. Then, faintly through the humming silence, Marina heard something strange, out of place, fragile, a sound too soft for backstage. Crying. She stopped. It wasn't stage crying. It wasn't part of the show. It was the sound of a child. Small, real, muffled but unmistakable. Marina frowned and turned toward the source. Somewhere just past the bend in the hallway, near the rear exit and the restrooms, the crying grew louder. She walked slowly, cautiously, each step heavier than the last. And then she saw him, A boy no older than 6, curled up on the ground, his tiny arms wrapped tightly around a woman lying limp beside him. His face was streaked with tears, his breathing uneven, and his body was trembling as he tried to hold on to her, as if his touch alone could bring her back. Marina froze. The woman, his mother no doubt, lay still, eyes closed, her head tilted to one side, chest barely rising. The boy clung to her like something was pulling her away, and he couldn't let go. Marina stepped closer. The boy looked up. Their eyes met, his wide with fear, hers wide with understanding. He didn't say a word, he didn't need to. He reached for her with a hand so small it barely filled her palm when she took it. He grabbed the hem of her costume, gripping it like it was the last solid thing left in his collapsing world. Marina dropped to her knees. She checked the woman's breathing. Shallow, but steady. She looked around. No one, not a soul in sight. All of them were inside, waiting for the lights to rise, for her cue, for the illusion to begin. The real world, it seemed, had been left out in the hallway. She had seconds to choose. A dream, a spotlight, a moment that could change everything. Or this. A child, a mother, a breath that might be their last. Marina didn't hesitate. She pulled out her phone, voice steady as she spoke to emergency dispatch, giving her exact location, explaining what she saw, what she heard, how old the boy looked, how pale the mother was. She stayed on the line. Her knees pressed against the cold floor, her coat came off her shoulders and wrapped around the boy who leaned into her side like she'd been there all along. From somewhere far away, she thought she heard someone calling her name. But Marina didn't move. She wasn't late. She was exactly where she needed to be. The sirens arrived in less than 7 minutes, but to Marina it felt like the universe had paused, stretched that one moment of choice into something endless, something sacred. She stayed on the line, voice low and calm, though her chest was tight with adrenaline. Her hand never left the boy's shoulder. He leaned against her, shaking in silence now. No more tears left, only the deep, exhausted breathing of a child who had been brave for too long. When the paramedics burst through the hallway doors, Marina rose quickly, waving them down, guiding them to the woman without hesitation. The boy jolted, as if unsure whether these new adults were friends or danger, but Marina kept a hand near, kept her voice soft, her presence grounded like a lighthouse through the storm. The EMTs worked swiftly, checking the woman's vitals, loading her onto a stretcher, speaking in clipped, efficient sentences. One of them nodded at Marina. "You the one who called?" She nodded. He gave her a quick, grateful look. "She's lucky you caught it early. Dehydration, most likely, maybe a seizure. We'll know more at the hospital." Marina blinked, the weight of that confirmation settling over her like a slow wave. The woman was going to live. The boy was going to stay with his mother, and none of it would have happened if she had walked away. They asked if she was a relative. She said no, just someone passing by. The boy clung to her leg as they tried to guide him along, but a kind-faced female EMT crouched beside him and whispered something that finally got him to move. Marina watched as they rolled the stretcher away, the boy walking beside it, still wearing her coat. She wanted to follow, to be sure, but she stood rooted there. Heart full, limbs heavy, head beginning to turn toward the theater door like someone waking from a long, strange dream. She didn't know how much time had passed until she stepped back into the hallway near the wings. The stage was silent now. The final music of the play was still echoing in the walls, a delicate piano chord that faded as the door closed behind her. Someone brushed past without looking at her. Another person muttered something under their breath. She finally shows up. No one stopped. No one asked. No one seemed to know or care where she had been. It wasn't until she reached the dressing room that she realized the curtain had already gone down. The show had gone on. Of course it had. The assistant stage manager was packing up props with a tight jaw, not even glancing in Marina's direction. Marina opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, the director stormed in from the hallway. He stopped dead when he saw her, the fury in his face practically vibrating under his skin. "You," he hissed, "where the hell were you?" Marina straightened, still slightly breathless, the chill of the hallway clinging to her skin. Someone needed help. A woman collapsed. Her child was... I don't care, the director snapped, cutting her off like a slammed door. This was your night, your role. You think people wait for you because you have a story? We replaced you, Kayla went on. She was ready. She was here. But you let everyone down, he spat, eyes narrowing. There are no excuses in this business. No one cares why you weren't on stage. They just see you weren't. The room pulsed with silence after he left. Marina stood there, still in costume, makeup faded, sweat drying on her skin. She glanced at the mirror, at the woman staring back who looked nothing like the triumphant star she was supposed to be. Her wig sat slightly crooked, her lipstick smudged at the corner. But her eyes? They were steady. In the hours that followed, word spread fast. Kayla, the understudy, had delivered a serviceable performance, someone said. A reviewer from a niche blog had noted her diligence under pressure. Marina's name wasn't even mentioned. By the next morning, the theater's Instagram page had updated the cast photo. Kayla now stood front and center. There was no trace Marina had ever been part of it. Later that week, the company quietly sent her an email, thanking her for her previous contributions, informing her they were moving in a different direction. No discussion, no explanation, no invitation to explain. In the world of small theaters and big egos, there were no second chances, especially not for women like her. Young, black, unconnected, easy to replace. Marina didn't fight it. She didn't write angry posts or beg for reconsideration. She sat in her small apartment that night, wrapped in a worn sweater, reheating soup she didn't touch, and stared at the ceiling in silence. Her mother called, asked how it went, and Marina said it was fine. Just fine. Then she hung up, turned off her phone, and let the quiet settle. Her dream had always been fragile. It had grown in soil not meant for flowers. But she had nurtured it anyway, kept it alive through winters, through closed doors, through every time someone looked at her and saw less. And now? This? She didn't regret her choice, not for 1 second, but the ache of the loss, that stayed. That night had been a promise, a spotlight she might never get back, and all she had to show for it was a child's grip on her costume and the memory of a woman's chest slowly rising beneath her hands. That was the night Marina Johnson vanished from the program. But it was also the night the right person saw her for who she truly was. And the story wasn't over yet. It was 3 days later when Marina's phone lit up with an unknown number, just as she was stepping off the subway platform into the cold wind outside Hunts Point. She almost let it go to voicemail. She'd gotten too many of those lately. Robocalls, casting rejections, theater friends too polite to ask what happened but too curious not to. But something in her gut told her to answer. She swiped across the screen, tucked her phone close to her ear and said, "Hello?" expecting the usual silence or scripted greeting. What she heard instead was a low, measured voice, elegant, steady, but unfamiliar. "Is this Miss Marina Johnson?" Marina straightened. "Yes, speaking." A pause, then the voice continued, "My name is Elena Rivas. I'm a director. I'd like to meet with you. I believe we have something to discuss." The name hit her like a stone dropped into water, slow to sink but deep when it landed. Elena Rivas. A legend in quiet circles, known for films that felt like whispered confessions and gut punches all at once. A director whose work didn't chase Oscars, but somehow always found its way into the hearts of juries anyway. Rivas didn't hold auditions in the usual way. She didn't attend opening nights, didn't grant interviews, and she certainly didn't call unknown actresses directly. Marina blinked, standing still in the sharp November wind. How did you get my number?" she asked, more bewildered than cautious. Rivas's voice was calm, almost amused. "I was in the audience. 3 nights ago, at the New Stage Theater. I came to see you perform." Marina's breath caught. "But I didn't," she began, voice catching in her throat. "I didn't perform." "I know," Rivas replied. "That's exactly why I'm calling." They met the next morning at a quiet cafe in Soho, One of those tucked-away places with exposed brick walls, second-hand furniture, and jazz humming low from dusty speakers. Marina arrived early, dressed in her best coat, the one without holes in the pockets, fingers gripped tight around a chipped ceramic mug of tea she didn't drink. When Elena Rivas walked in, no one noticed. No one ever did. She was older than Marina expected, her salt and pepper hair pinned up in a careless twist, eyes dark and watchful. She sat down without ceremony, set her gloves neatly on the table, and looked at Marina like she was studying a puzzle she already knew how to solve. "You left the stage," she said. "No greeting, no small talk? Why?" Marina blinked. She faltered, then steadied. "I found a boy in the hallway. He was crying, holding his mother. She'd collapsed. No one was around. I called an ambulance. I stayed." Elena nodded once, slowly. "I know. The boy is my son." The world tilted. Marina felt it, not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in the quiet, internal collapse of everything she thought she understood about that night. She stared at Elena, unsure if she'd heard correctly. "Your son?" she whispered. Elena's face softened just slightly. "He was with his nanny. She had a condition. Neither of them told me. I sent him to see the play. I was in the back row, watching. Not just the stage, but the space around it." Marina didn't speak. Couldn't. Her mind played back every detail, how the boy had clutched her dress, how the hallway had felt like the only real place in the world, how she hadn't once thought that anyone might be watching. Elena continued. "I saw you leave the wings. I saw the confusion, the way your name vanished from the program by morning. But what struck me was not that you disappeared. It was why." She leaned in now, her voice lower, firmer. "Everyone wants to be seen. Most actors think it happens under the lights. But you made a choice when no one was watching. That matters to me." From her coat, Elena pulled a script, folded neatly, tied with a thin black ribbon. She slid it across the table. "I'm casting a film, Last Breath of Autumn. The story of a woman who walks away from the world to care for someone no one else will. Not a martyr, not a saint, just someone who stays." Marina stared at the bundle in front of her, barely daring to touch it. "You want me to read for it?" Elena raised an eyebrow. "I want you to play the lead." It didn't feel real. It didn't compute. In an industry that chewed up girls like her, black, unconnected, broke, it was easier to believe in rejection than opportunity. Marina swallowed, voice thick. "Why me?" Elena's eyes didn't blink. "Because when my son was crying in a hallway, you were the only person who didn't look away." The cafe went silent again, though the music still played. Marina reached for the script with trembling fingers. It was heavier than she expected, like the pages had weight beyond paper, like they held something she'd been chasing for years without knowing the shape of it. And just like that, the door she thought had closed behind her forever, the door that had slammed shut with the weight of one missed cue, swung back open. But this time, she wasn't walking through it because someone gave her permission. She was walking through it because she'd earned it. Off stage, in the quiet, in the moment no one was supposed to see. And someone had. The studio wasn't grand. It wasn't the sweeping, high-ceilinged kind Marina had seen in behind-the-scenes documentaries or imagined when she used to fall asleep reading film scripts by flashlight. It was a modest converted warehouse in Brooklyn, with bare concrete floors, scuffed walls, and the faint scent of paint and sawdust from sets being built just a few feet away. But when Marina walked in that morning clutching the script Elena had given her, something in the air felt electric, like the gravity had shifted just slightly in her favor for the first time in years. She didn't know anyone on set, no one greeted her like a star. There was no makeup trailer with her name, no assistant scurrying behind her. Just a production assistant with a clipboard who pointed her toward a taped X on the floor and a quiet nod from Elena as she emerged from a shadowy corner, dressed in the same earth-toned scarf and long black coat she wore when they first met. The room fell still when Elena raised her hand. No countdown, no slate, no formal command, just a voice, quiet but direct. "When you're ready, Marina." She stood in the center of the room, script in hand, though she barely needed it. She'd read the scene a dozen times, alone in her apartment, mouthing the words until they felt like they belonged to her. until they were no longer dialogue but memory. The character was a hospice worker named Grace, caring for a dying stranger who reminded her of someone she'd once lost. It wasn't flashy, no breakdowns, no monologues designed to wring tears from a jury of critics. Just the quiet work of holding someone's hand while they faded, staying when no one else would. Marina took a breath and began. The shield in act. She remembered. She remembered the boy's eyes wide with fear, the feeling of her knees on the cold hallway floor, the trembling in her hands as she held the phone steady, the moment she realized no one was coming, unless she stayed. And when the scene ended, when the final line slipped from her lips like breath from a body, no one clapped. There was only stillness, a kind of reverence, as if everyone in the room had been allowed for a few moments to witness something not meant for public display. Elena stepped forward slowly, eyes sharp but unreadable. She didn't ask for a second take. She didn't give praise. She simply said, "Thank you, Marina. That'll be all for today." And then she turned to her team and said, "We've found her." That night, Marina lay in bed, script pressed to her chest, ceiling fans spinning above her like time itself had finally softened its grip. She didn't call anyone. She didn't post about it. Something in her told her to keep this moment sacred, untouched by hashtags or status updates. She wasn't holding a trophy, she wasn't on a red carpet, but for the first time in her life someone had seen what she did when there were no lines to read, when there were no lights, when no one was watching. Days turned into weeks, and production began. Marina moved through the process like a woman entering a world she'd only glimpsed through cracks. Everything was new, and yet nothing felt foreign. She worked harder than anyone else, arriving early, staying late, asking questions, listening, learning the language of film like it was her second skin. She didn't try to impress. She tried to understand. The crew took notice. The other actors, some seasoned, some new, watched her closely, not because she was famous, but because there was something in the way she carried herself, quiet, steady, fierce. Elena, ever distant, rarely gave direct praise, but she watched Marina like a sculptor watches stone, measuring, noting where to chisel and where to let the natural shape emerge, and over time a bond formed. Not quite friendship, not mentorship exactly, something in between. A shared knowing, a trust that didn't require words. One afternoon, during a scene in which Marina's character had to sit silently at the foot of a hospital bed, Elena called cut mid-take. The room stilled. Marina looked up, alarmed. Had she missed something? Elena walked over, knelt beside her, and whispered, "You don't need to act it. You already lived it." Marina swallowed hard, nodding. She didn't have to be told twice. From that day on, the camera captured not just her performance, but her presence, not just her expression, but her conviction. She wasn't pretending to be someone who stayed, she was someone who stayed. And as filming wrapped and the final scene was shot in the golden light of late afternoon, Marina standing beneath a tree, her back to the camera, the wind catching the hem of her coat, Elena whispered to her assistant, "This is the kind of actress who reminds people why film matters." Marina didn't hear it, but she didn't need to. She had stopped needing validation the day she chose a child over a cue, the day she stepped off the stage and into something far more real. What she had now wasn't luck. It wasn't a second chance. It was earned. Every line, every frame, every breath. The film premiered on a gray evening in late October, inside a quiet art house theater nestled between a bookstore and a bakery in the West Village. There was no red carpet, no paparazzi, no blinding flashes of press. Just a modest marquee lit by flickering bulbs, and a line of guests that stretched politely around the block. Critics, cinephiles, faculty from NYU's film department. A few friends of the crew. Elena Rivas, as expected, declined interviews, refused to pose for photos, and arrived precisely 7 minutes before the screening began, slipping into a back row with the ease of someone who preferred shadows over spectacle. But when Marina stepped onto the modest stage for a brief introduction, everything in the room seemed to shift. The murmurs quieted, heads turned. And for the first time, Marina Johnson stood in front of a full house, not as an understudy, not as a name no one remembered, but as the face on the poster, the heart of the story, the reason they had all come. She spoke briefly, softly, her voice calm but grounded, thanking the crew, thanking Elena, and most of all, thanking the people who stay when it's easier to walk away. No one clapped at first. They just watched her, like they knew instinctively that this wasn't just another actress. This was someone who had become the role by living it before she ever stepped in front of a lens. The lights dimmed, the screen flickered to life. Last Breath of Autumn was unlike anything anyone expected. It didn't push, it didn't scream for attention. It unfolded slowly, deliberately, like a quiet hand extended in a moment of pain. Marina's performance was haunting in its restraint. No melodrama, no theatrics, just presence. In a single scene where her character sat at the kitchen table, staring at a spoon in her tea, the entire audience held their breath, because somehow in that stillness she was telling them everything. Loss, exhaustion, hope, surrender. By the time the credits rolled, the theater was silent, a silence so full it felt like sound. And then, suddenly, completely, they rose to their feet. The applause started slowly, then swelled, rising like a wave that had been waiting for the right tide. Marina didn't bow. She didn't cry. She simply stood, back straight, eyes wide, letting it wash over her without needing to hold on to it. Because this wasn't the validation she had once begged the world for. This was the echo of a truth she had already known. In the weeks that followed, the film swept the independent circuit. Festivals lit up with her name. Critics used words like transcendent, unshakable, a revelation. Variety called her the soul of the season. The New Yorker wrote, "Marina Johnson doesn't act, she listens, and in doing so teaches us how to feel." For the first time, casting directors reached out to her. Her inbox, once a graveyard of polite rejections, now overflowed with invitations. Studio offers arrived, some with six-figure deals attached. Talk shows asked her to appear. Stylists offered clothes. Brands requested endorsements. Her photo was printed on covers she couldn't afford to buy last year. But Marina didn't run toward the noise. She answered with care, chose her projects slowly, not because she was afraid, but because she remembered what silence had taught her. She didn't want to be everywhere. She wanted to be honest, to every role, every moment, every person sitting in a dark theater hoping to feel seen. One morning, while waiting in line for coffee, a woman tapped her gently on the shoulder. Older, weathered, her eyes rimmed in exhaustion but kind. She said, "You don't know me, but I watched your film last night. I haven't spoken to my daughter in 3 years." I called her this morning, then she simply nodded and walked away. And that, more than any award, more than any article or paycheck, stayed with Marina. Not long after, she received a package at her apartment. No return address. Inside was her old coat, the same one she had draped around the little boy in the hallway that night, folded neatly, dry-cleaned, restitched where the lining had begun to fray. Tucked inside the pocket was a note written in a child's hand. "Thank you for staying with me when I was scared. I'm not scared as much anymore. I hope you have another coat now. Love, Matthew." Marina held it to her chest, and for the first time in months she cried, not for loss, but for what had found her. Because that night she hadn't just saved someone, she had been saved too. Not by a role, not by a director, not even by the success that followed, but by a decision made in a quiet hallway, far from any stage, when the world offered her 2 paths, and she chose the one no one saw. And someone had. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.